Welcome to the Tradies in Business podcast with your hosts Warwick Bidwell and Nicole Cox. Divert your phone and grab a brew as Waz and Nick unpack tips, tales, secrets and stuff-ups from guests both inside and outside your trade, helping educate and inspire you to break the cycle of gut-busting and money stress and create a true trade business.
G'day, Coxie.
G'day from me and my tummy.
I literally just deleted a bit of a sound grab of you talking about your tummy grumbling.
It is grumbling and we've had lunch.
I know. Did you skip breakfast?
I did skip breakfast.
It's interesting calling it skipping breakfast.
No, I purposely fasted.
It's fasting. It's like we've changed the name of it.
It is, isn't it?
It's more accurate, though, because it's fasting, not skipping.
I didn't skip anything, and these days I eat... Well, at the moment I'm eating 2 meals a day. That's it. Prior to that, or before my holiday, I was down to 1. And enjoying it.
You surviving okay?
I'm not dead.
You don't look very dead.
No.
Speaking of skipping things, lots of listeners are probably skipping...
I'm just shaking my head now. Here comes the segue.
That's my segues. Skipping the profit piece in their business.
I think
Working
if you
hard
did
and
the
not making a
stats,
profit.
what do you reckon it'd be?
What? How many businesses make a profit?
Don't make a profit.
Either. Because if you
Yes.
subtract one from the other, you get the other bit.
Smart ass.
Yeah. See, because you could say, I fast twice a day or I eat 1 meal a day. It's the same thing.
Okay.
Anyway, I reckon that maybe 10 to 20% of trade businesses actually make a profit.
So I would have said exactly the same. And I mean an actual profit, not the profit. I mean the profit that's in the bank at the end of the year, not the profit that the accountant is saying, hey, look here on your profit and loss, you made a profit.
Yeah, and you don't actually have any of it.
How many times do we hear that?
A few times.
And I get it. I was there once. I didn't understand.
I was there last week. So I'm there every time I pay the tax bill.
Well, that's a good thing, really.
Yeah, true. And we talk about that in today's
do?
episode, actually.
Segues everywhere.
Oh, I'm just segueing left,
I should
right,
buy you a
and all
proper
over the
segue
place.
for Christmas.
I'd probably kill myself. So today we're talking profit, we're talking numbers, we're talking bookkeeping and finance and
writing a book.
Excuse me.
We don't yawn the whole
Yes.
way through.
No. And
You're
that's
gonna make me
really
proper yawn now.
that's really unfair to Katie, today's guest,
It is.
because Katie's written a book about profit and how you should actually profit first
Yes.
if you're a tradie.
That was really tightly wound. Well done.
So it's one of the things about having a trade business is you should probably make a profit.
Well, isn't that why we work so hard?
I don't know that too many people think too much about that.
I don't think they do either. I think they just get to the end of the year and wonder where all the money's gone.
Because if they weren't working so hard, they'd be sitting in the pub and spending money and getting fat.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
I'm going to leave that one.
there's no segue there at all.
No.
Anywho, if you are working hard, if you're not sure whether you're making a profit or not, if you know that you're not making a profit, if your accountant tells you make a profit but you're not seeing the cash, if you'd just like to get better at making more profit and, as Katie said in this episode, make better decisions, then please, please, please listen to this episode. If you can, take some notes and stick around till the end where you can get all the details on how to actually grab a copy of Katie's book, which is called Profit First for Tradies. And also, we are going to record some deep dive stuff. So if you're, if you listen to this, you think, oh, yeah, that's all a bit straightforward. I'm probably a bit beyond that. We're going to do a session with Katie and do a bit of a deep dive on profit and cash flow and forecasting and some of those really fundamental business skills for our Trade Desk members. So if you're not a member of the Trade Desk yet, there's some cool offers floating around.
There are. You need to hit up the Facebook group, Tradies in Business.
make sure you join the group. That's your pathway. That's your first step.
Right, it's your first.
Is go join
first question.
the Tradies in Business group on Facebook, and you'll find all the sneaky secret offers that we're making in there for our members.
Very sneaky.
So join the community, join the tribe, and become a part of Tradies in Business, and you'll find out about all the cool stuff there. But otherwise, enjoy today's episode and Coxie's notifications.
See you.
And we're joined today by Katie Marshall, who I'm very excited to speak with because Katie's going to be talking about profit.
Profit's exciting.
Yeah.
I like profit.
And I think a lot of listeners probably just went, profit. How do you even spell that? Katie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Absolute pleasure. Now, I'm always interested to talk to our guests that have written a book, and probably mostly because I'm supposed to have written one about 3 times over now, and I've had people try and hold me accountable to certain dates. It's like, okay, by this time next year, you're going to have written your book, and I'm like, sure thing, whatever. So now I can drag Coxie into that, but you have written a book, Katie.
I have, yes.
It's called
Profit First for Tradies, and it is at the printers as we speak, and will be available end of next month.
Gosh, that's damn exciting.
I know. How long did it take you to write the book?
So it took the writing part of it. I wrote 45,000 words in 30 days.
Holy moly.
That's awesome.
That's hard work.
It's actually not as difficult as you see. So I can give you plenty of hints and tips on this, but I just allocated an hour a day to sit down and just write and get it all out. It doesn't have to be perfect to start with. Yeah. And just gave myself that time frame, and then obviously there's edits and back and forth and so on. But the initial manuscript was 30 days.
So is there a structure to writing it? Are you writing it knowing that there will be 10 chapters in the book and this is what you're trying to achieve in each chapter before you actually start writing?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a finance background, so I'm very much a systems and processes and plans type of person. So yes, before I start, there is a definite outline of what I'm going to talk about and when. That can always change as you move through it. But there's a definite starting point, a definite structure to start with, because we want it to make sense for the reader and not just me getting that information out. So, yes.
So you said it took 30 days to write the book, but how long did it take to actually get to the first day of the writing period?
3 years.
3 years.
Oh, so there's still time for you. Yay.
Yeah, 3 years. So I have actually previously written twice 2 lots of 40,000 words.
Oh, wow.
So third time lucky. The first 2 times when I did it, I reread it and just went, that's boring. Nobody's going to read this.
Oh, my gosh.
So put it aside. And then when I become involved with Profit First, and then that's, the topic became much more interesting and much more useful for me to write for my clients. So when you really know and love the topic, it's easy. You'll be surprised how quick you can do it.
So I should write about motorbikes because I'd be able to write 45,000 words in a heartbeat.
Yeah, exactly. Different story, right?
Perfect.
Not going to help too many tradies in their businesses though. Should be on topic. Well, Coxie, you've written, how many blog posts have you written?
900. So I've probably written a book or
900,000 words? Because
Must.
each blog would probably average 750 to 1,000 words.
Yeah.
There you go.
Oh, I feel pretty good now. Thank
Hey,
you.
can we just reprint your blogs
Yeah, we
as a
could.
book?
We could. It's not going to help
And
tradies
it's
much.
just thinking of it a different way.
Yeah, that's true, right?
Yeah.
If you think about sitting down and writing a book, that's really a big mountain to climb. But I actually just sat down and wrote a chapter at a time. What topic am I writing about today? Write about that.
It's really
About the next
interesting that you
topic.
said that you'd done it 2 times over and you read back and felt it was boring. I find that really interesting because I think as women particularly, we're really good at convincing ourselves what we've done is no good.
How did you feel about how did you feel about this book that's actually
question.
about to be published? Did you read it back and go, oh, that one's not much better?
it was a completely different feeling right from the
okay.
word go. It was completely different. It was a joy to write. It was, I use the word fun all the time when I talk about writing this book, and I know that fun and writing a book are probably not two words that are often used.
No.
But that's what I just kept saying, that it was really fun. But yes, my editor did say that women are much more critical of their writing than men are.
Us blokes don't really give a toss.
No. That's why women sell more books than men.
We think we're so awesome that whatever we write's going to be great.
Anyway,
yes. Anyway, moving on, says Katie. So, Katie, so 3 years leading up to writing the book. Give our listeners a bit of background, because obviously they have no idea who you are at this point, although you're about to be very famous because you've just written a book. But tell us a bit about your background and how you came to be writing a book called Profit First for Tradies.
So prior to my children, I was in the corporate world. I was a financial planner working for a Big Four bank, specialising in working with self-employed people who were nearing retirement, 10, 15 years out. So I saw a lot of people who had worked very, very hard throughout their life in their business, and they really had nothing much to show for it. And so once I had my children, the commute to the city was too long. I'd always done some bookkeeping on the side for my family and friends, because pretty much everyone around me is self-employed. My parents were self-employed, my brother, everybody. So I'd always done that. So once I had my daughter, I decided to just work part-time for a financial planner locally and just did a bit of bookkeeping. I always swore black and blue I would never, ever work for myself, because my parents had a coffee shop in the 80s and 90s. So started out Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, ended up 7 days a week, Thursday night, Saturday, completely different, where mum would sit down with her manual journal and write every transaction out. So there was no way I was going to work for myself. And then I come across Xero, the bookkeeping program, and started using it for myself, started using it for my brother, who was a landscaper. And then it dawned on me that this could really help small business owners, because it gave us the information much quicker than how we had it before.
Yep.
So I then said to my husband, I'm going to work for myself. And the look on his face was like, what? So then I started to build up that bookkeeping side over a few years, and had my son. Then I got to the point where I realized that even though I could get my clients' bookkeeping up to date and make it really efficient, it still wasn't making the change in their business that I had hoped. And I got really bored with it, and I really hated it. And that's when I kind of looked at it and went, either I have to go back and get a job, but we know if you've been self-employed for a little while that we're kind of unemployable, or I needed to make a change. And what could I do to make it interesting again, and to make sure that I was helping my clients? So I actually went through my client list and looked at who I loved to work with and who I didn't love to work with as much. All my tradies were on my love to work with list. So the first thing I did was let everyone know who wasn't on that list that my situation had changed, and that I would refer them on to someone. You
sacked a whole bunch of clients.
Yes.
I sacked a whole bunch of clients.
Yeah.
I sacked them.
How good did that feel?
So it felt awful to start with, because I felt bad that I had to, all those things. But then very quickly I started to love doing what I was doing again, and working with tradies. As I said, like my dad's a tradie, my husband's a tradie, my brother, my grandpa, uncles, father-in-law, I'm surrounded by them.
Yep.
My favourite time as a child was in the shed with Dad, pulling cars and motorbikes and stuff apart.
Yep.
In fact, if I hadn't become a financial planner, I would have been a mechanic. It was only that I went overseas for a year, and then when I come back, I thought, really, girl being a mechanic back in the 90s was kind of going to be a tough gig, and everyone kind of talked me out of it. So, so that was fun again for a while. And then again, I got to that point where I'm like, it's not having the impact. It's making a difference, but not big enough. And I'd come across Profit First just after Mike wrote the book. and read it, loved it, put it on the shelf, didn't do anything else about it. Picked it back up again, started implementing it in my business, and then put it back on the shelf again.
Mm-hmm.
And then in 2018, I decided that either I went and got a job, and we had already figured that wouldn't work, or I needed to do something different. So that's when I picked up Profit First again and become certified and started really that being the focus in my business. And then that's when I started to see the changes that I had always hoped for with my tradies. So that's how Profit First come about. And then fortunately for me, we were able to do a mastermind day in May last year with Mike McAllowitz himself. He came out. So there was a really small group of 14, 15 of us for the day, which was amazing to be in the room with such a small group, with somebody who has written 6 books, multiple, massive businesses, bought and sold, built, all that type of thing. We were having lunch and he happened to be sitting next to me. We were just chatting and talking about tradies and that type of thing. And at the end of lunch, he just kind of casually said, I really think you could write the Profit First for Tradies book. I laughed and thought he'd lost his mind. And we went back and finished off the day and so on and so forth. And by the time I'd got back to the hotel that night, I was just like, I've got to do this. Fortunately for me, I'd been part of a business group called Key Person of Influence. Part of their program is to publish.
Yep.
I had excellent contacts to do what I needed to do. So I kind of thought, if Mike suggested it and I have the contacts, I know I can write the words, we'll give this a go. And it's been really fun. Like, I know, as I said, that's not normally a word we use.
Yeah,
writing,
about writing. Or it's not normally a word we would use about profit and loss and cash flow and bookkeeping and that sort of stuff either. So are you finding that's fun again?
Absolutely, because I can finally take those numbers and do something with them for the client. And for me, it's all about the education. Like, there's no point in doing anything with a client unless we are improving their knowledge. Obviously, as you would know, every client will learn and grow at different rates. But for me, it's not about them just handing over their books and us doing their bookkeeping for them and us implementing Profit First. It's very much that interaction, one-on-one, group sessions, whatever it may be, to help them learn, because if they understand it better, they can make better decisions. When they make better decisions, they're not working 80 hours a week. They're not getting loans and ATO payment plans and all those sorts of things because they don't know any better. So, yes, and that's why I was saying last year was the most fun year I've had in business.
Cool, that's a big statement.
That is a big statement. I think that's something everybody hopes for.
Exactly. And I, at many points in my business, I never thought that I would be able to say that. I never thought that I would have a year that I enjoyed so much. So,
it's so easy to get bogged down in that feeling of business isn't meant to be fun. It's not meant to be exciting. I'm not supposed to feel energetic and excited about going to work and doing what I do. It's really easy to get caught in that until you understand there's actually a better way. It doesn't need to be that way. You can be excited. It can be energetic and tick all your boxes and fill all your buckets. It can be lots of fun, but it's hard to switch that mindset once you already have that. No, this is just what I've got to do.
It's crap.
And particularly I find with tradies, their circle of friends and so on, everyone's going through that same thing. So it's very easy to stay in that. Times are tough, getting staff's hard, cash flow's tough, it's up and down. And that's the conversations that are, if they're at a barbecue, that's the conversation. If somebody walked in and said, I'm doing really great, I've got profit in the bank, paying myself a wage, it's all fun and fantastic. We all know what the rest of the group will do and say.
Because we've just normalised.
That's not the norm. And that's what I say to my clients. I'm like, we're going to make that norm. That has to be the normal.
Yes.
You can't continue to work yourself into the ground like most of our tradies are doing. It's not healthy.
No.
It's one of the things I love about some of our groups, like the drawing boards and not so much the tradiepreneurs because they're one-on-one working with Coxie and I, but certainly our group programs, is there are people getting results and there are people thinking differently and running job ads and getting good candidates turn up and sending, marketing emails out and getting responses. And so there's a much more positive conversation in those groups than I guess I see out in the public space online, where it is about the struggle and how bad things are. And if you're hanging around that mindset, you're going to believe it. And so, our drawing board members are like, actually, things are going pretty good. We're making some good change and there's hard work to do. But generally speaking, the attitude is much more positive. So, it's just a shame sometimes that people don't recognise that and change who they're hanging out with. It's a pretty old rule.
But it's so easy for people to get caught into that trap, and it's hard to make a change, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to make a change on your mindset. It's hard to be brave enough to say, I will spend X amount of months to be part of a drawing board or to get a coach to help me through. Those things are difficult to do. They're challenging. And so I think human nature is that we tend to just, I don't know, whinge and bitch and moan and sit in the position we're in and join everybody else in the normal place of cash flow struggles and business struggles and marriage struggles, rather than say, you know what, I actually want to do it a bit differently.
Yeah. Well, that would mean that I stand out, though, which in Australia is a bad idea.
It is a bad idea.
And that's the problem, isn't it? It's like if you're having that conversation at a barbecue and you say, oh, actually, I've just invested X amount of dollars a month to work with yourselves.
Yeah.
Like,
what are you, crazy? How much?
Yeah.
How much are you spending on that?
You could do all that yourself.
You know how long it takes to earn that? Like, we know those conversations. So it is very, very difficult. And I actually find with my clients anyway that in many instances they won't sort of publicise what they're doing until kind of 3, 4, 5 months down the track when they see results. Or they've seen results and they've seen consistent results, and then they'll be like, oh, I mentioned to Ben that I'm doing this. And I've had quite a few tradies say that to me. It's like, oh, that's interesting. They kind of
it's like a secret society before that, though, because it's like, we don't want anyone to know that we're trying something new. It's crazy.
We can't be. And again, it's the tall poppy syndrome in Australia. When we're seen to be doing something different or succeeding, or we're just so quickly cut down. It's terrifying.
Yep.
I'm really interested to know. Sorry, Warwick, I always jump in on you.
No.
Actually, no, it's usually the other way around. It's my turn.
Usually me cutting across you.
I've not read Profit First. I'd love you to give me an idea on what the key principles are.
I was just going to ask the same question, Coxie. Look at us vibing on the podcast.
So Profit First is just a cash management system. So similar to, the old envelope system that our grandparents or grandparents would have used. So in Profit First, we have different bank accounts for different purposes. And we make sure that the first bank account, the first money that gets allocated is for profit. So obviously when we start out, profit is either non-existent or very, very small. And the Profit First system is about changing our habits. So what we usually do is whatever's left, if there is any, that's profit. And because we're not focusing on that, there is either none or very little. So we flip that and we allocate profit first. Now, when somebody starts with Profit First, that can be as small as 1%. We just start small, but we start with something. And we work through to make sure that you are putting profit aside, that you're actually paying yourself for the job you are doing in your business, which we know many of our tradies don't.
Can we put in some angels singing now, please? Hello, hallelujah.
So they're our two main they're our two goals. Your profit is your reward for being the business owner, because it is a risk, and we should be rewarded for that, and paying yourself the way you should be. And then obviously we put money aside for taxes, GST, and then what's left is our operating expenses. So what that does is it forces us to change our habits and actually look at what we're spending, rather than just pushing it aside, paying them as they come in, or that type of thing. So
and I love that principle. It's very similar to what I've probably been banging on about for years, and I suspect Coxie has as well, of pay yourself first. But I think a lot of people find it hard to wrap their head around that, because it's like, well, that's cute, but I've got tax and I've got employee wages and I've got, work cover and I've got the lease payments on the excavator. And so I know you're telling me to pay myself first, but it's just not the way it's done. And I think, to be honest, I'm going to call out a whole bunch of tradies here. And if you're listening to this and this is you, then I hope you're squirming in your seat, is a lot of money gets spent under the disguise of overheads and running a business costs. And, there's decisions made about expenses that I think with turning it on its head like you guys do, Katie, it, like you say, it forces people to make their expenses fit into that bucket, right? Which is essentially what you're saying. Would that be a fair assumption?
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Exactly.
they wouldn't go buy the latest DeWalt kit when they've already got one that works, because it's like
When they bought one a month ago.
exactly.
Yes, that's right.
Or go drop 20 grand on the Hilux setup for the the custom built tray thing on the back, where it's like, is that going to actually get you any more customers? Do you need that? So if you've got to make it fit into the overheads bucket, that's brilliant. I love it.
Yeah. And what it does is, and what I always say is, I'm not saying you can't have things. If you want the upgrade on your Hilux or you want all those things, absolutely, you can have those. But let's work out when you can afford them.
Yeah.
And when you focus on your finances, it's amazing how quickly you can actually turn them around. So I don't know how many clients I've seen that when we look at their operating expenses account, still are paying for an insurance policy for a car or a truck or a ute or a machine or something that they sold like 18 months ago.
Yeah.
Because they've never paid any attention. Or how many people are paying mobile phones, a ridiculously high plan on their mobile phone, but nobody wants to ring Telstra because we know that can be a pain. But for a half an hour phone conversation, I guess, when you're ringing Telstra, you could actually save yourself quite a bit of money. So it's all about just saving those small changes over time. Then you can afford to pay yourself. You can afford to have profit. You can afford your upgrade on your Hilux or whatever that may be.
That's right.
It's just actually having a look at them and making conscious decisions. And like you said, do you need the latest DeWalt package when you've just got the one 2 months ago? Probably not. I don't know how many tape measures and wheelbarrows that my clients need. It's
that's
like,
so my husband.
it's like, I just, there's 3 of you on the team and you've got 6 wheelbarrows.
Yep.
It's like, I'm not sure how that works.
And where do you
why do
even
you
put them?
Oh, exactly. And that's the thing. A couple of $100 there, 50 here,
Yes.
20 there. All those things add up. So it's actually not difficult to reduce your operating expenses by 10% without having to go without. Just from those little bits and pieces that you're completely unaware of that are coming out of the account.
So, Katie, how is that different to the age-old stereotype of the tight-ass tradie? Because tradies have this reputation for being tight-asses, but I have to say, in the years that I've worked with them, I actually don't believe that. I just think they're not tight-asses across the board, in my experience. They're tight-asses in certain areas, and I actually think it's the wrong areas. How do you stop this focus on expenses from becoming an across-the-board just tight attitude?
I guess it depends on the person. And generally, the tradie who is tight on expenses to start with is probably doing quite well anyway. As a general rule, I find that tradies are not tight asses on expenses. They will be tight in other areas, but it comes down to convenience. Instead of making sure the truck's packed the day before with the right tools and, the right number of wheelbarrows, they get to the job. Then they send the apprentice off, and it's like, and it's making their life easier to be able to do it like that. We just have to send the apprentice to get this.
Oh my gosh, 7
so I would
times
love
in
for
a
them-
day. Yeah,
That's right. And what you're paying him how many dollars an hour and so on and so forth. So there's lots of those holes that we can help plug. But as far as being tight asses, I wish they would be a little bit more. Like,
Yeah.
just not. And I think too that comes with the connotation of the person who scrimps and saves on every last thing. And that's not what we want to do. We just want to make you more aware of what you're buying and when, because it benefits them in the end. They then get a wage. They can then have a holiday. They can then afford to, make their mortgage repayments without wondering what invoice is going to be paid that week and so on. So, in my experience, they're not tight on their expenses, unfortunately.
And I like what you're saying there about where they are tight, because it's like, because of that disorganisation a lot of the times and the lack of planning and forethought and structure, they do race off and buy another wheelbarrow because the other one's sitting on another site somewhere half an hour away, and it's quicker just to go around the corner and buy another one for $100. And that racks up a big bill on that sort of stuff, sending the apprentice off because they didn't invest the time to actually plan things better. And then if they can trim those expenses down, they can afford to invest in their business elsewhere and, invest in some good marketing, or invest in a bookkeeper so they don't have to do it themselves, or so they're not making their slave wife do it at home at night times. Or, join the bloody drawing board, or go get their own business coach or something, right? So it's just, it's shifting where the money goes. It's pretty simple, isn't it?
It is simple.
It is.
And it's empowering.
Shifting their focus.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think they don't believe that they can do it.
Yes.
They don't believe the amount of times I've heard, I'm just a dumbass, insert whichever tradie here.
Yep.
I would be a wealthy woman if I had $1 for every time that. And I always say to them, you can't be good at whatever it is you do and be a dumbass.
No.
So
true.
You're very good at something, so you can learn.
Yes.
You just have never been shown what to do around the numbers. So that's what we help them with. So, they're very capable.
We have a lot of tradies that we find once we start to break down some barriers, it's shame that stops them from coming and talking to someone. And financially, particularly, it's quite shameful if you don't have control, if you don't understand where the money's going. If people like Warwick and I are talking to you about having a profit and loss and understanding your cash flow and a cash flow projection, and do you know where you're going to be in 3 months' time? And it's shameful for a lot of, business owners generally, but particularly tradies, because they like to be in control, for them not to be in control. They don't understand. They're so busy being on the tools, doing the things that they need to do, rather than looking at what they need to understand as a business owner to have that control. And with that control comes this amazing, empowering feeling, because they finally have profit in the bank. They're paying themselves a reasonable wage. They don't have to worry about the mortgage payment, like you were saying. And it's really, there's going to be a couple of crucial, uncomfortable conversations, and then after that it becomes quite simple. It's a half-hour phone call to Telstra, or it's spending time with somebody like yourself to understand where they're at and helping plugging some leaks there. And it's a change of behaviour, of course. When we're talking about the wheelbarrow, there are changes in behaviour, but they're not actually that hard to do. It's just there's this bunch of shame beforehand, before they're ready to put their hand up and say, actually, I need some help here. How do you get past that when you're dealing with the tradies you are? Are those first conversations as uncomfortable as I imagine they could be?
I tend to find when they finally make that step and get help, whether it be for their bookkeeping or the profit first side of things, it's generally because they are one step away from everything falling apart. And so they're faced with that, you've got to do something. It's very rare that I see somebody who just decides that they're going to get this all sorted out now. It's usually looking pretty grim. So the first thing I always say to them is, I guarantee you I have helped somebody in a worse situation than you, because how bad they think their situation is and how bad it actually is always very different.
Two different stories.
So that they feel very shameful, very embarrassed, very, there's lots of, I can't believe I didn't do this sooner and all that type of stuff. So I just say to them at the very beginning, it's going to be tough for a bit. You're actually going to hate me and you're probably going to swear at me a few times. It's about once we get everything set up and up to date and running, one day all of a sudden you'll just kind of go, oh, it's easy now. Like, it's really simple. So I make I don't hide the fact that it's not all rosy right from the start. They do have to change a few things, but it's certainly not impossible. But yeah, just I think letting them know that they're not the only one. And I always say to them, I don't care how many of your self-employed mates are standing around telling you how good their business is going. My stats tell me that the majority of them are not going so well.
So I want to talk about the C word.
Oh, gosh.
And there's a couple of C words that I want to talk about, actually.
Well, can you hit us up with them? Come on, let's do it. Rip the Band-Aid off.
So the first one is change. So you mentioned just then, Katie, about making changes. Is there some ways that you've found that I guess helps people start to make those changes more readily?
I think showing them how simple those changes can be. Again, what they think needs to happen is very different to what actually needs to happen through lack of education and understanding of that process.
Yeah.
So just by really simply showing them, we're at this point here, we need to get to there, and just plotting out what we're going to do. For me, I'm always about just take one step. What's the one thing we can do today? What's the one thing tomorrow? And so on. So rather than sort of laying everything out and showing them A to Z in every little form, it's like, right, we're going to deal with this for the moment, and we get through that. And just explaining to them and making it, my clients get lots of like one-page kind of checklist type of things, right? This is what you need to do, because we can talk about something and it's all very well. They then go away and go, well, what did she say about that? Oh, what do I need to do? I know I have to do something, but I can't remember because I've now back into the workplace and I've got 70 other thousand things to do. So yeah, lots of checklists from me. Just do these, just do this, do this next step. And that gives them some structure, and it takes that, they don't have to think about it as much because they just have to do these 3 things today, do these 3 things next week. And before they know it, they're 3 months down the track and they've made all these really small changes that change the business as a whole quite considerably.
Can you give us some examples of some of those things? Obviously, we don't want you to give away the whole content of the book, but what are some of the simple things that make a difference?
So from a bookkeeping perspective, having a bookkeeping system, having it up to date, as you say, getting a bookkeeper, somebody who is has the knowledge and experience. Quite often I see the poor wife or partner has been dumped with it, and she might be a physiotherapist or she might be whatever she is, who's now looking after the kids, but has been dumped with this stuff. So to make the time to find somebody who knows what they're doing. From a profit first perspective, a really simple one to start with is open a bank account where you put your GST in. As soon as you're paid, take the GST off, put it into that bank account.
Oh my gosh, I love it.
It's the simplest thing to do.
It is. And Mike says this, he's like, it's not rocket science.
No.
This is not new. He's just taken some different methodologies and used it in thousands of businesses. And
I have to say though, I've fired that one at a few clients of ours over the years. And the look on a lot of faces sometimes, though, I don't know if you get this as well, Katie, when I suggest that they put the tax aside in a bank account, it's just like this look of, like I just suggested, that they could jump off their roof and fly to Brisbane, right? It's like, how
Crazy,
do you,
isn't it?
but no, you can't, how? Do you get that sort of disbelief?
I might be a little bit more straight down the line, I think, and for me, it's not an option for them. I'm like, you need to do this.
Yes.
If you're coming to me and you're ready for help, then this is what we're going to do. If you don't want to follow the structure, that is okay. But I say to them, I'm like, look, I will tell you in however many weeks it is when you come back to me and go, oh, actually, this is not working this way. I will say, I told you so. You've come to me because you feel that I'm the specialist in this area and I can help you.
Yeah.
So please don't pay me to not take my advice.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
If you, I actually would not work with people. I'm like, you've got to be all in. Let's give it a go. What's the worst that could happen? You're in a bit of a shambles at the moment. What's the worst? You stay where you are. give it a try.
Okay.
Because what you're doing now is not working.
Yes.
So let's not stay there.
So I want to stop joking around and actually talk about the 4-letter C word. I think it's time to bust it out, and it's cash, right? That joke is going to fall flat with every listener because I reckon everybody knows.
They all know it's coming from you,
There's
Woz.
no E on this podcast episode, and we know Woz is full of it. So, but I reckon you would have heard this a few times, Katie. So my accountant tells me I made a profit, but I can't see any of it in my bank account. So there's profit, but no cash. So I get what you're saying about, the profit first model and, sales minus profit equals expenses. That's great. But what about the cash? Does that just magically make the cash turn up, Katie?
No, of course it doesn't. But what it does, it helps you manage the cash so you can see where you are lacking.
Yep.
So every client I see, and I always say, I'm sure you've had a situation where you've gone to the accountant at the end of the year, he slid across the table your profit and loss and your balance sheet. Profit and loss tells you you've made money. You're sitting there going, shit, I don't know where that money is. You sign your paperwork, say thank you very much, and you walk out the door because you're too ashamed to ask anything about next year, and you do the same thing again and again and again, and nothing changes. So with Profit First, it is the cash that we work with. So we're talking about money in and money out. So obviously your profit and loss and your balance sheet are important documents for tax purposes. We need to have those produced and so on. But we don't actually talk a lot about your profit and loss and your balance sheet as such in Profit First. What we do is we take the information off and we rearrange it and play with it to see what your cash is looking like. So it could be that you're spending too much money. It could be that you are not charging enough. It could be that you are doing too many freebies with lots of materials in them or whatever that may be. So when we start to look at the cash, it tells us a number of different stories. It could be that you're paying your subbies far too much. You've got too many guys on staff. And that's when we get into the nitty-gritty of what is causing that cash lack generally. That cash deficiency.
Because it's a big area where people just get lost and completely bamboozled, where there seems to be this disconnect between the cash and the profit, and they're just not quite sure how one turns into the other.
and I think they're not taught. We're not, unless you've studied finances of some description, you're not taught about those things. And even just, as I said, just a profit and loss and a balance sheet in itself is not going to help you with your cash flow, because they are different processes. They're different parts of the business. So I always get very frightened when somebody starts out with, I turn over this much money, and I'm like, ugh, I don't care how much.
It's not a measure of anything, no. Yeah. Making the money is easy, keeping it is the hard
part. But what
part.
I find is that and the default I find tends to be, I'll get more jobs, I'll work more hours, I'll do this, and it's like, and I always say to them, look, I'm like, if you don't know how much you're actually making and keeping, stay home and go broke, because it's actually much better for your health to just sit on the lounge and go broke than go and work 80 hours a week and go broke, because the outcome is still the same, except you actually have your health and you haven't put yourself in hospital. So with cash, and when we look at Profit First, that's what we're looking at, the cash. So when you've received it and when it's going out and how that works, and that will then highlight the areas where the problems could be, and then that's when we can focus on, okay, you've got a staffing issue, you're paying your guys so much here or whatever it may be. Are you paying them the right rates, or you're not paying them, or you're paying them too much? And that's where we get those focus points as to what needs to be fixed, which will all, when improved, then help your profit and loss and your balance sheet, obviously. We want to pay tax. We want you to make money so you pay tax. We don't want you to pay any more tax than you need to pay, but not paying any tax is not always
It's the wrong goal.
the best outcome.
It is the wrong goal.
It's the wrong way to measure success. Like, I only paid $3,000 tax last year. It's like, wow, your business must be crap. Like,
Yeah.
There's a lot of tradies squirming right now.
yeah.
A lot.
Yeah.
Because if
they
they're-
associate tax with paying tax as a bad thing. I'm like, if you're not paying the appropriate amount of tax, you're not making any money.
no.
And it's
Go
again,
get
it's
a
the
job.
same normalising of everybody thinking it's
Yeah.
a cool thing not to pay tax, right?
It's the
Tax.
wrong way to measure success. I detest paying taxes. I absolutely hate it. And I love how much tax I pay now compared to 10 years ago because, you know, it's a sign of the strength of my wealth creation and my business and everything else. So, you know, do I pay money to a good accountant to structure it all properly for me? Absolutely. And I feel like I don't pay a cent more than I absolutely have to. But yeah, this whole thing, this national sport in Australia
It is.
of paying the least amount of tax on paper in dollars is just dumb. It is. It's dumb. If you're doing that currently and you're listening to this podcast, don't be dumb. Pay more tax. Like, that should be your goal. Your goal should be to pay $100,000 in tax next year.
That's a nice little business.
Yeah.
But that's the
what
thing,
I
right?
always
Yeah.
talk about too. I'm like, you need to, as we said, don't pay tax unnecessarily, but you need to have a really great financial team.
Yes.
And your financial team has your goals
Yes.
in mind because you've decided on what they are. And that financial team might consist of your bookkeeper. It might consist of myself doing profit first. It might consist of business coaches like yourselves and your tax accountant. And we are all striving for whatever those goals might be.
Yeah, it's a question. Sorry to cut in, Katie. It's a question of optimizing everything. You know, it's no different to anybody listening to this who's into cars or anything with an engine. Tuning a car is all about getting the most power out of the least input. You know, you don't want the thing to be producing 500 horsepower, but it's drinking 98 unleaded at 50 litres a minute. You know, like it's awful. It's not going to drive to the end of the street before you run out of gas. And so many businesses are running like that. You know, they've got 6 wheelbarrows and they've only got 3 employees. And that's like burning all this extra fuel in your business for no additional gain. So, you know, people like yourself and us and, you know, great accountants and financial planners and even insurance brokers and all those people are all about getting the most out of the least input.
Yeah.
You know, burn the least amount of fuel to get the most time back and the most money paid off your house and the best holiday you can absolutely squeeze out of this thing, and have it running, you know, the best that it can. So I get a bit fired up about this stuff, even though I actually detest the profession that I studied in. I don't detest it. I just find it boring as bat poo. But I rabbit on about it because it is so bloody important. And if you're in business and you don't know all this stuff, then that's also
you need
dumb.
some help. You need help.
Like, just put your hand up. Don't be proud and all that shit. Like, talk to Katie or, you know, read your book. There you go.
And I think from when I was a financial planner and saw those hardworking self-employed people getting towards the end, and they always had this, I guess they always had this idea that they could sell the business and that would kind of be their nest egg and their superannuation. And that's difficult to do then. It's difficult still to do now. And, you know, we have this, you know, superannuation's been around for many, 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 many years. And I still hear people bitch and moan about paying super. And now I'm like, it's not going anywhere. Deal with it.
Yeah.
Like,
it's like, oh my gosh, the sun came up again today.
I know. Business is a game that has certain rules put onto us by government and so on. We have to play by those. So let's make them work for us rather than bitching and moaning about them and sticking our heads in the ground. And as you say, it's just about, if you don't know where to turn or you don't know who to look for, or I've had too many bad experiences with a bad, you know, insert financial person here, that's not a good enough reason to not try and find somebody. There is plenty of information out there. There is plenty of wonderful people in all different professions to help the tradies. As you say, you just have to put your hand up and say, hey, where do I start? What can I do? what are my options?
So I'm going to use that as a famous was segue. I've had a few people give me feedback about my segues and how corny and terrible they are. So I'm going to continue with them just to annoy you listeners. So Katie, speaking of information, and I guess there's a way to kind of wrap all of this up and put a bow on it. If you had 1,000 tradies in business in a room, what is one piece of advice you would like to leave them all with?
Oh, so many pieces of advice. What is the one?
Yeah, the one thing. What's the one thing, Katie?
One thing. Start asking questions. Just start asking questions. It doesn't have to be a good question. You just have to start, because when you start asking a question, that'll give you a bit more information. You can ask a better question and a better question. And before you know it, all of a sudden you've found yourself in a room with some amazing coaches or with a great accountant or whatever it may be. But if you don't ask, you're never going to know. So
I love that.
That's such a good starting point for so
Simple
many people.
too.
Yeah.
just really simple. Don't overcomplicate it.
No.
So where do people go to find out more about you and the book and Profit First and all that stuff? What's the best place to go stalk you?
Yep. So my website is profitfirstfortradies.com.au. I also have a Facebook group called Profit First for Tradies, which you can search. So that's full of nearly 1,000 tradies, tradie wives and partners in there who really just help each other out, ask questions. I jump in, do some education pieces and that type of thing. But it's really a community where you can ask those questions and start getting that support as well. And then the book, obviously, that will be out next month, and you'll be able to get that from my website or the usual Booktopia, Amazon and the like.
Awesome.
Very exciting.
Cool
Are
stuff.
you going to have a book launch?
Yes. So
That sounded a bit reluctant.
Yeah, it did.
so I am not always the most excited person to be the centre of attention. So a book launch slightly freaked me out a little bit. So I decided I'm going to have a book party, and now I can cope with that much better.
I love
Yes,
it.
a book
I love it. I love it.
So it was a mindset shift for me.
Yes.
Just changing that slightly, and then all of a sudden I was like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah.
So
Good.
yeah.
Kind of like
So we
getting
will
your
do
books
that.
up to date, just a mindset shift, and then
So
all of a
true.
sudden you can do it, listeners.
See,
So.
you did it again.
That one's for Mitch. All right, Katie. Well, look, we could have done another 2 hours on the money stuff and the numbers and profit and cash flow and everything else. We might actually get you back to do some sneaky bonus content for our Trade Desk members. So we'll organise
to.
that with you. And if you're not in the Trade Desk and you'd like to learn a bit more from Katie about cash flow and all that sort of stuff, then make sure you jump into the Trade Desk and have a look at that. But Katie, thanks so much for your time today. Been great talking to another numbers geek, and and we look forward to lots of success for you with the book launch.
Thank you.
Sorry, the book party.
Yeah, book party. Book party.
Thanks,
mate.
Katie.
Thank you. Bye.
You've been listening to the Tradies in Business podcast with Warwick Bidwell and Nicole Cox. Find out more about today's guest, tools for your trade business, and other cool stuff at tradiesinbusiness.com.au.